afternoon, everyone. I'm Marcia Harris. I'm a board member and program chair for Voice4Israel. I want to welcome all of you today to our program. We're very, very pleased to be collaborating with Hadassah on this interesting program on how Hadassah works with Israel to heal the world. Probably all of you are pretty familiar with Zoom by now, but I just want to remind you that as questions occur to you, just put them in the chat at the bottom of the screen. I heard a new made-up Yiddish term called Oi gezoomt, which means oi, another Zoom. But it's actually one of the bright spots, I think, of this past year that allows us to connect with each other and to bring programs to you. Right now, I'm going to turn the program over to Florence Link. Florence is president of the Chapel Hill-Durham Hadassah chapter.
Good evening, everybody. Late afternoon. I'm very happy that you're here. I want to welcome you to this program, which we have connected with Voice4Israel. And I want to just tell you that the reason that we're doing this program, the major reason really, is that Voice4Israel and Hadassah share an ideology. We're Zionists. As well, we share community this way. It makes the Jewish community here that much stronger. And we have survived through the millennia largely because we were a community. Yes, you have 3 Jews and you have 5 opinions or something like that. But nevertheless, when push comes to shove and things get rough, we get band together. And that's why we are sharing this with Voice4Israel. And they were kind enough, and I want to thank them for hosting us and letting us tell you about Hadassah. And now what I would like to do is turn this over to Diane Bisgaier, who is going to tell us about how Hadassah got started and what transpired in the beginning. Hadassah is over 100 years old. I don't know how many of you know that, but it's a very interesting beginning. So let me give you Diane Bisgaier, who is the area vice president in our region, and she will get into her thing. Here, go ahead, Diane.
Oh, hi. Thank you, Florence, and hello, everybody. Before I start, I want to just show you this brief video that gives you a great overview of Hadassah Medical Organization, and what we are doing in the world today. Thanks.
At Hadassah, healing is at the heart of our mission, and Israel is in our DNA. Our founder, Henrietta Zold, brought healing and medicine to pre-state Israel, paving the way for Israel's modern healthcare system. We proudly advance her legacy of healing the world. We heal the world through our internationally renowned Hadassah Medical Organization, which treats 1 million patients a year, regardless of race, religion, or nationality, and is recognized for its humanitarian efforts around the world. We heal the world by empowering women to make a difference. We raise our voices to affect change for critical issues, including the Never Again Education Act. Our youth villages in Israel provide education and support for at-risk young adults. And we are proud to fund scholarships for thousands of youths to attend Young JUDAEA summer camps and Israel programs. For over a century, Hadassah has stood for healing our world. Today, our passion and determination are stronger than ever.
We need to be heard, and we need not to be afraid. We need your voices to be loud.
Thank you. Now I'm going to tell you Hadassah's origin story. It will stretch over 109 years. But first, here is the thing. In the early part of the 20th century, in the United States, women were coming out of their homes and into the world. They had career options, albeit almost exclusively in teaching, nursing, or social work. Those who didn't work were volunteering. Progressive movements saw women in key positions working in child welfare and education. Soon, women would be getting the vote.
Hey, Diane, I think you need to turn your PowerPoint on.
I am right now.
Okay, great,
there.
Thanks.
You got it. Yeah, I was waiting for to get to Henrietta Zold, and here she is. So enter Henrietta Zold, who at age 49 took her first trip to Palestine in 1909. She had already done the work of a lifetime as an editor, as a rabbinical student, and as a teacher of English and citizenship to immigrants. But she was galvanized to extraordinary action by the horrific starvation and disease that she saw in Palestine on that first trip. 3 years later, in February 1912, 38 women met at Temple Emmanuel in New York City and founded Hadassah Chapter of Daughters of Zion, electing Zold as president and choosing nursing as its initial focus. Hadassah has had a remarkably consistent mission throughout its history: to address physical suffering, to heal those in need without regard for race or religion, and to provide the infrastructure to support and enable this work. A motivating force was Zionism, which connected the American Jewish volunteer women in the US with the pioneers in Palestine. Hadassah defined practical Zionism in a 1914 resolution, saying it would, quote, promote Jewish institutions and enterprises in Palestine and foster Zionist ideals in America. In 1914, Hadassah's name was changed to its current one, Hadassah, the Women's Zionist Organization of America. In 1913, this new Hadassah organization collected $5,000 and sent 2 public health nurses to Palestine, where they worked to improve the health and hygiene of children and of expectant mothers, whose death rate at that time was 50%. They also treated trachoma, an eye disease that could lead to blindness. The outbreak of World War I ended their efforts prematurely. Then in 1916, there was a typhoid fever epidemic. Palestine needed help and asked Zionist organizations in the US for aid. Hadassah responded by organizing the American Zionist Medical Unit, or AZMU, which arrived in 1918 and worked in clinics throughout Palestine. From this early point in time, Hadassah established the principle of serving all with equal care, regardless of race, creed, ethnicity, or nationality. 8 years later, in 1924, the AZMU was renamed Hadassah Medical Organization, or HMO, which is our medical arm to this day. Also in 1918, the AZMU established the Hadassah Nurses Training School, with the arrival of 20 nurses from America as teachers. This school is important for several reasons. It was the first post-high school professional school for women in Palestine, and it was the only nursing school there until 1936. 400 women applied for the 40 spots available in the first nursing class. Before 1918, nursing had not existed in Palestine. Because this was a new field, it enabled Hadassah to develop the nurse as an independent professional. In the past, the nurse was only a doctor's assistant. The school was able to fill the critical need for locally trained young nurses. Most important, it created the model Hadassah has used with all its schools: occupational therapy, dental school, public health, medical, and many more. The model of recruiting the best professionals to come to Palestine to teach and train local residents, who could then go on to work in and run these schools. One more milestone in 1918, the Rothschild Hospital building in Jerusalem was given to Hadassah. It was Hadassah's first hospital, but it already was not big enough. Throughout the 1930s, Hadassah operated out of several buildings in Jerusalem, each providing a different medical service. It also had hospitals and clinics in 5 other cities in Palestine. The decision was made to close these and focus on developing a medical complex within Jerusalem. In 1934, the cornerstone was laid for a new hospital on Mount Scopus in an Arab neighborhood overlooking Jerusalem. It was designed by eminent architect Eric Mendelsohn, who had just emigrated to Israel from Germany. This is his sketch. To stay in roughly chronological order here, we're going to briefly leave the medical arena and explore another pillar of Hadassah, this time in the area of child welfare with Youth ALIYAH. Youth ALIYAH was founded in 1933 in Berlin to help get Jewish children out of Nazi Germany. Henrietta Zold became its first director and remained in this position until her death in 1945. By the outbreak of World War II, over 5,000 young people had emigrated to Palestine alone without their parents. Youth ALIYAH was dedicated to the rescue of children and youth, exemplifying Hadassah's namesake, Esther, which is Hebrew for Hadassah. She was the woman who saved her people. Here is one story from World War II. Henrietta Zold had learned in the summer of '42 that 870 Polish children were languishing in Tehran, starving and ill, after being released from Siberian slave labor camps. This photo shows them in Tehran. Because Palestine was then under the British mandate, British permission was needed to bring the children to Palestine. Zold negotiated with the British through 2 Hadassah colleagues in Washington, D.C., and finally, in December 1942, they received travel certificates for the children. The children arrived 2 months later, in February of '43, the first group of Holocaust survivors to do so. The last leg of their journey was by train, coming north from Egypt. Zold was there to meet them. Youth ALIYAH has evolved over the years. Hadassah currently supports 2 youth villages which nurture, heal, and teach at-risk youth, both immigrants and native Israelis. Since 1934, over 300,000 young people from 80 different lands have graduated from these youth villages. Now we're back at Mount Scopus, and it's summer of 1939. Mount Scopus officially opened as the Rothschild Hadassah University Hospital. It was an innovative, modern medical center, complete with a hospital, a medical school, research labs, and of course, the nursing school, all under one roof. Its reputation attracted even prominent Arabs from surrounding countries. 3 months later, World War II broke out. After World War II, the War of Independence immediately began. The UN partition plan called for separate, independent Jewish and Arab enclaves in Palestine. In that first year of the war, despite the danger in getting to Mount Scopus, the hospital there treated 90% of those wounded in Jerusalem. The tragedy struck on April 18, 1948, when a convoy with clear medical markings on its vehicles wound its way up the narrow back road to Hadassah Hospital, which they had had to take because the main road was closed. A mine was detonated, Molotov cocktails were thrown, flames and gunfire burst out everywhere. 78 Jews, including the Director General of HMO, died. The decision was made to close the hospital a few weeks later for the safety of staff and patients. They were moved to temporary quarters in empty buildings in downtown Jerusalem. Mount Scopus did not reopen until after Israel unified Jerusalem during the 1967 Six-Day War, 19 years later. In the meantime, Hadassah got busy planning a new medical center. It was to be located west of Jerusalem on a hill above the village of Ein Kerem, 14 miles from Mount Scopus. Groundbreaking was in 1952, and the new Hadassah Hospital Ein Kerem officially opened in June of 1961. It was planned as a doctor's training facility in conjunction with Hebrew University, with the highest possible level of medicine and research. It also, beginning in the 1970s, worked in developing countries in Africa and in Brazil to establish medical institutions and train doctors and nurses. In 1976, a new version of the nursing school opened as the Henrietta Zold Hadassah Hebrew University School of Nursing, offering a 4-year Bachelor of Science degree. Since the opening of Ein Kerem 60 years ago, Jerusalem's population has tripled. Hadassah has matched this pace of growth. What better way to celebrate Hadassah's centennial in 2012 than to build a new hospital, the Sarah Wetzman Davidson Hospital Tower, a state-of-the-art 19-story inpatient facility, opened in 2012 on the Ein Kerem campus. And the round building you see in the middle of the photo is currently being renovated. We are building it up, adding 2 floors to the top. These accomplishments throughout the century are because of the vision of our leaders and because they could rely on the fundraising efforts of the women volunteering back in the US, raising funds to heal the world. And now, Gail Moskowitz, who is our immediate past region president and is extremely knowledgeable, will tell us how Hadassah is healing the world today.
If you will bear with me one more second, I will get myself set up here. And as we switch presenters. So, hi. Diane, what a beautiful job. Thank you. I'm Gail Moskowitz. I'm the immediate past president of Hadassah Southern Seaboard region. And I also serve in several other ways for Hadassah. I write a monthly president's message that is sent to leadership across the United States. The message synthesizes some of the overall information regarding our projects, medicine, research, advocacy, and programming for our members. I also serve on the leadership training team. What I hope to impart this afternoon is to give you a brief glimpse into the mission and goals of Hadassah, the Women's Zionist Organization of America. The name in and of itself it speaks to exactly who we are. We are an organization of women who believe in the legitimacy and survival of Israel, the Jewish homeland, and that its existence is integral to the endurance of the Jewish people. Thank Diane for giving us a meaningful taste of Hadassah's first century. So now we continue our mission. Supporting Israel healing the world. At Hadassah, we believe we have the power to heal the world. For us, that means bringing healing in every sense of the word, where it is needed most in the United States, Israel, and around the world. Every day, as volunteers, we are all volunteers, 300,000 volunteers. Every day as volunteers, as philanthropists, and as change makers. We believe we can and we must do all that we are able to advance justice and healing. We call ourselves the women who do and believe in the power of the women who do. We've been defying the odds for more than a century, and that we believe that each of us has the power to heal the world, to take action, and to make an impact. Our focus, our areas of focus are advancing healthcare and medicine, connecting to Israel and Zionism, and advocating for change that supports the everyday lives of women, of their health, and of their well-being. So Steve Jobs says, the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do change the world. And I want to highlight Malia Littman's story. She benefited from the life-changing care that resulted from stem cell research that ameliorated the symptoms of her MS. And that Hadassah continued to, and then she stayed with Hadassah to continue. I'm going to start that again, if you don't mind. I'm sorry, because I wanted to make this point, I forgot. So she benefited from the life-changing care that resulted from stem cell research for ameliorating the symptoms of MS that Hadassah continued to do during the time that the use of stem cells were curtailed here in the United States. And after she was given this treatment, Malia gave back. And I would like to share a little bit of that with you now. It is amazing. So forgive me, I'm going to have to out of here. And there's a lot of pieces here. My computer is not responding. And there. I have now gotten my computer respond. And I'm going to, there you go. Sharing. Forgive me. Okay.
The Talmud teaches that whoever saves one life saves the world entire. Malia Littman used to understand that passage to mean that for an individual person, their life was the world. Now Malia understands that because Hadassah has saved her life, she is able to devote the rest of her life to saving others. By 2016, Malia had been enduring the progressive, disabling effects of multiple sclerosis for over 20 years. None of the conventional therapies and drugs available in the U.S. had helped. Her condition had become so severe that the simple act of taking a shower resulted in such exhaustion that she had to take a nap. After breaking her leg in an MS-related fall, Malia committed herself to finding the best chance for a better life. Of all the treatments being tested around the world, she believed the stem cell treatment at Hadassah offered the best hope. From the very first treatment, Malia realized improvement that she never allowed herself to dream possible. 4 years later, Malia has her life back. Over the last 4 years, Malia has been able to travel to Hawaii, indoor skydive, host 36 family members for Thanksgiving, and dance with her son at his wedding. Malia has helped other patients like Derek Wood of Dallas, an ALS patient, get into treatment. Derek hosted a fundraiser in Dallas that generated over $100,000 for Hadassah. Derek is alive today. He, like Malia, celebrates every day of living. As a grateful patient, Malia has also become a regular volunteer at Dallas Children's Hospital, dressing in costumes and bringing joy to children, parents, and staff. The hospital selected Malia as the Volunteer of the Year. By bringing joy to others, Malia has found unimaginable happiness in her life. There are many patients around the world that have had amazing results from medical advancements at Hadassah. There is no other charitable cause that has the global impact of Hadassah. Hadassah is the only hospital in the world ever to be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. Hadassah treats patients regardless of race, religion, or ethnic origin. At Hadassah, Israeli and Palestinian doctors work hand in hand. Jewish, Christian, and Muslim staff and doctors collaborate for the benefit of their patients. Hadassah shares its medical research with the world. Malia appeared with Dr. Carusis, her doctor at Hadassah, at the 12th Annual World Stem Cell Summit to share the amazing results of the research of Dr. Carusis. Support for Hadassah benefits the economy of Israel. Hadassah Medical Organization is the largest employer after the government of Israel. Hadassah uses your donations judiciously. Israel's health system is ranked 4th in the world for efficiency. The waiting room for Dr. Carusis illustrates that your donations go toward funding critical research rather than luxury offices. Hadassah promotes gender equity in medical research. There's a scarcity of medical research on diseases and treatments that affect men and women differently. MS is just one of these diseases by 4 to 1. People around the world are suffering from diseases that can be eradicated in our lifetime. By saving lives now, we impact lives in the future exponentially. Hadassah is also involved in a wide range of other medical research projects. Hadassah is at the forefront of treating and eradicating COVID by identifying the cause of blood clots in patients affected by COVID, developing a medicine to successfully treat those infected, and conducting trials for a possible vaccine. Hadassah has also made great strides in the treatment of heart disease, breast cancer, melanoma, ALS, and age-related macular degeneration. Stuart Greenberg, a stage 4 metastatic melanoma patient from Florida, was given 3 months to live by 3 different doctors in America. Stuart was treated by doctors at Hadassah in 2012 and is alive today, cured of cancer. Your support of Hadassah means a better life for patients fighting disease today and eradicating those diseases for millions in the future.
So I want to state that a little bit more has been done, and I will bring us up to date with the innovations that are taking place at Hadassah since this video was made. So, all right. There are too many moving parts here, forgive me. That, and I think I'm going to be good to go in 1 minute. Go, stop sharing, and all right. There. So I want to say that I've met ALIYAH, and she's an amazing person. She brings so much she has given so much back. And when you're with this woman, her energy is just, it's drinkable. You feel her passion and her belief and her support. And I hope, there will be some links that I'm going to share with you at the end. And one of those links is a deeper dive into ALIYAH's story, and I think you will find it really interesting. So let's talk about Hadassah Medical Organization. It's a multi-ethnic organization, the patients, staff, and the entirety of our training programs. It's supported by generous donors in the United States and around the world. The Hadassah Medical Organization, which we affectionately refer to as HMO, consists of 2 Jerusalem hospitals, the research, the educational programs. It consists of the medical care we perform, and these entities and staff offer innovative, compassionate global leadership in medical care, treatments, and research serving more than 1 million women, men, and children a year. Again, regardless of religion, race, or nationality. We are proud that in the complex world of the Middle East, very complex world of the Middle East, the staff and patients at Hadassah hospitals serve as a model of coexistence. So because of COVID-19, this year has been devastating, emotionally and physically, to the entire international community. Hadassah believes in innovation. We are not the organization that says, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We're the organization that says, keep fixing it, keep making it better. We try desperately never to use that expression that says, well, this is how we always have done it. Because how we always have done it is only the beginning of how we're going to do it next. Our ability for innovation was on full display in our response to the ravages of COVID, using the existing infrastructure of our capacity for innovation, which consists of our infrastructure, our capacity for innovation, our flexibility, and our teamwork. And HMO got started, and they responded. So first, having a baby in the time of COVID, we are seeing pregnant women who are seriously ill. And HMO opened the first unit in Israel to quarantine mothers who had COVID-19. The babies had to be separated from their mothers. The nurses lovingly cared for the parent and the babies. This requires an enormous effort of double everything. Two separate maternity emergency rooms and 2 separate delivery rooms. And that's different than the 2 separate rooms needed for patients without COVID-19. This was said by Professor Simcha Yagel, who's the head of the Division of Obstetrics and Gynecology. And he says, we're experiencing baby boom. And that's because the word is out that we will accept pregnant women with COVID when other hospitals really can't. They're not set up to do so. And when this began, the nurses understood the grief new mothers were experiencing. And they created a system of videos and information that was empathetically shuttled from room to room. That's innovation. That's innovation with love. These actions needed to be added to the seriousness of the care. And I will note also that Hadassah was the first hospital to open a pediatric ICU for children who were suffering with COVID-19. Another first, Hadassah was the first hospital in Israel to offer COVID-19 outpatient treatment. We did not allow ourselves to be reduced by fear. We got in it immediately. We opened our arms and we embraced the challenges. And we did this with finely tuned medical intuition and by following the science. Healthcare professionals at Hadassah and Keren offered the first outpatient treatment to vulnerable COVID-19 patients to prevent the progression of their disease and the need for hospitalization. Bam, Lan, Ivimab, I know I said this completely wrong. Apparently my husband tells me that the MAB is the ending for most monoclonal antibody drugs. And he tells me that I'm not pronouncing it properly, which I'm probably not. I'm not a medical person. The treatment plan for these patients is a one-time antibody therapy called Bam, Lan, Ivimab. I'm so sorry, I tried. Intended for the use in the beginning stages of the illness and after the patient is tested positive for COVID. And the treatment, including the observation time, takes about 2 hours. And you know what? It's been tremendously successful. We didn't wait. We got in there. We did the work. COVID-19 patients also are benefiting from our innovation and research because we continue our focus on the miracles of research at HMO. Alicentra, a drug for critically ill COVID patients, was developed by Professor Dror Mevorach, head of Hadassah and Keren's Hospital Coronavirus Department and Chief Scientific Medical Officer at NLivex. And they have just begun their phase 3 trials at Hadassah Medical Organization. So there is a mutual benefit in collaborating with medical tech companies, and HMO promotes this practice. As a part of our collective vaccine effort, HMO joined the Israeli coalition to roll out the world's fastest COVID-19 inoculation drive. I am sure that all of you have read and heard that Israel vaccinated 500,000 individuals in the first 9 days that the vaccine was available. As of March 15th, apparently 50% of Israel's population has had both doses, and 60% has had at least 1 dose. Professor Alon Moses, director of HMO's Department of Clinical Microbiology and Infectious Disease, says, it is really being treated like a war, he said, and Israel is experienced in fighting battles. He says the hospitals are involved, the community clinics are involved, the Army enlisted 700 paramedics to help with the injections of the vaccines because everyone remains on readiness. At HMO, our skilled healthcare providers continue to work tirelessly through the global pandemic, and they are front and center part of the heroic effort to provide this effective vaccine. And you know, we already know that the effort has paid off. We're seeing plunging numbers in Israel, and we need to recognize that that's work they do on top of all the other work they must do. So an act of tikkun olam, and as I speak about this, I'm going to now just make my next remarks about Hadassah International. I'm going to get there in a moment. So an act of tikkun olam, Hadassah and Kerem took on the task of running what was called Israel's Brothers in Arms COVID-19 campaign for foreign diplomats. The hospital staff vaccinated hundreds of diplomats, staff, and their families living and working in Israel. Countries such as Ukraine, Ghana, Turkey, Taiwan, the US, Italy, Spain, and Nigeria, Kazakhstan, Jordan, Vietnam, Congo, and Guatemala were represented. And some of these countries have not yet begun their own vaccination campaigns. And that's going to bring me to tell you about Hadassah International. Hadassah International, let me tell you about their mission. It is to enhance the image of Israel through the work of Hadassah Medical Center, provide support for Hadassah Medical Center so that it remains an academic center of excellence for healing, teaching, and research, and serve as a bridge to nations serve as a bridge to nations through medicine. This organization was founded in 1983. Hadassah International unites people of all faith traditions, and nationalities in their mission to improve their lives around the globe through financial support of the pioneering medical healing, teaching, and research at Hadassah Medical Center in Jerusalem. Hadassah International spans 5 continents and is made up of volunteer men and women, most of whom are not Jewish, who believe that advancement and cooperation in medicine transcend politics, religion, and national boundaries. The universal language of medicine allows Hadassah International to build the bridges needed between nations and help to establish research and clinical ventures between Hadassah Medical Center and medical institutions all over the world. So Hadassah medical personnel have responded to the ongoing medical problems and disasters all over the world for many decades. Pediatric patients in Nepal, Professor Dan Engelhard, the head of the Pediatric ID Clinic and the Pediatric AIDS Center at Hadassah, he was sent by the Israeli government and Hadassah on a humanitarian mission to Zaire to work with pediatric AIDS patients and to create programs through education to stem the tide of new cases to children. Professor Engelhard has also headed the pediatric department of the Israeli field hospitals for Rwandan refugees, the Israeli field hospital in Kosovo for refugees, and the field hospital for earthquake victims in Düzce, Turkey. He was dispatched to Sri Lanka following the country's tsunami. Again, a Hadassah nurse was in charge of the IDF operating theater in the Philippines. Hadassah, after their latest disaster, Hadassah dispatched medical personnel to Haiti, and they stayed there for a solid year after the earthquake devastated the country of Haiti. We have responded to disasters in the Philippines, Southeast Asia, and Australia, and we support medical care in the former Soviet Union. There's so much to tell you, and I will not speak to the full spectrum of our work. But what I'm going to do is make sure that you get links to be able to look at some of this material. And I really suggest to you to look at the material for Hadassah International. So How Hadassah builds bridges to peace? Well, another thing we do is an outstanding example of this ideal is 2 Hadassah nurses, one Jewish and one Arab, who work with a non-governmental organization called Nurses in the Middle East. Nurses of the Middle East believe that Jews working side by side with Arabs break down the barriers and change perspectives. Again, I can't go into all of this now. I'm going to make sure you get a link to this. You really have to read what's going on with the Nurses of the Middle East. It's very cool. So, an Arab doctor and an ultra-Orthodox Jew find common ground in a COVID ward, and that's not the beginning of the joke. However, the Washington Post wrote this story in April of 2020, and I note the date because it speaks to Hadassah's ongoing work that began at the beginning, but it speaks to Hadassah's ongoing work that in some sense dispels the myths about everyday political tensions in Israel. An Arab doctor and an ultra-Orthodox Jew find common ground every day at Hadassah hospitals. Another story of innovation is Professor Higazi, who is a Muslim woman, and with her international colleagues, she's published a seminal paper in the leading medical journal of, I believe in Britain, called Blood, about their discovery that, and I'm going to make a mess of this word too, that alpha-deficin, a peptide and amino acid chain, speeds up the creation of blood clots and prevents their disintegration. This finding is crucial in understanding what is happening to COVID-19 patients because existing I pronounced that word properly a few minutes ago, existing anticoagulant drugs don't impact alpha deficit. She says, we took blood samples from patients at Hadassah COVID-19 outbreak department and found a high concentrate of alpha deficit. So the sicker the patient was, the researchers found, the higher the concentration of this peptide. Now, why is this important? It's important so that researchers can now address these clinical implications. And again, Professor Higazi partnered with a standing tech company, a medical tech company. Okay, I just want to move for a moment and talk a little bit about our youth villages. And I just want to say this one piece, which is that nearly a third of our children in Israel live in poverty. A third of our children in Israel live in poverty, and almost 500,000 suffer from high-risk situations like abuse and learning disabilities. So central to our mission is the well-being of our future generations. And we look at these young immigrants and at-risk native Israelis, and we want them to receive a full spectrum of help, and they do. They get shelter, food, counseling and education, and other supportive services at our two youth villages, from Hebrew lessons and classes on Jewish heritage to athletics and art. I have been to both of these villages, and I will tell you, it knocks your socks off to watch the kinesthetic education of farming, making wine, jewelry, woodwork. My two best, very big mezuzot on my doors are from these youth villages. And it's not just the children. It is the staff of these villages are counselors, teachers, mentors, friends, coaches. They give their all to these children. And what we have found is that our programs are paying off. In one of our villages, our Meir Shveya, students complete their Bagrat matriculation requirements at twice the national average, and 97% of the students at Meir Shveya graduate and do their army service at the IDF. So I hope that what I have imparted in these words today gives you a taste of Hadassah's efforts to be part of the medical infrastructure of Israel. I hope that it imparted the innovation of care through vital research and intuitive medicine, and how through the efforts and support of the 300,000 volunteer members and the international community, we continue our mission to advance healthcare and medicine, connect to Israel and Zionism, and advocate for change. We hope that it advances the narrative that at Hadassah, we have the power to heal the world. I want to just leave you with one more thought. And I'm going to give you again a link to this amazing video, Dr. Shadan Salome, that she is the first Arab head of emergency medicine in Israel. And now I'm going to bring this part of our conversation, this part of our presentation to an end. And I'm going to give our program back to Marcia. And here we go.
Thank you, Gail and Diane, for such interesting and important information. The story about Dr. Littman is incredible. She's such an inspiration. We thought we'd take a few minutes. We have a few questions that have come in, but before that, we thought we'd take a few minutes to have the leaders, some of the leaders of Hadassah and Voice for Israel. We're going to bring in Dr. Mike Ross, co-founder and co-president of Voice for Israel, to just talk a little bit about their reason for being a Zionist and for being involved in the various organizations. And it was interesting when we started planning this program and just had an informal discussion among us, we each had a very different story. So we're just going to be very brief and take a few minutes to tell our story about coming to Zionism. Florence, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. My parents were Holocaust survivors. And I was born overseas. As a matter of fact, I was born in a displaced persons camp where they ended up after the war. Everybody in the family were murdered. In any case, my father was an ardent Zionist from his youth. And while in the DP camp, he helped to smuggle weapons to Israel. He took great risk, but he did this. And I was raised in a home, largely because of my father, a very, very Zionist home. My parents had an argument that lasted their entire marriage, that my mother didn't want to go to a place where there was war, and my father wanted so badly to move to Israel. But she won out. In any case, they made trips, and my father is buried there. And I came to love Judaism. I came to love my heritage, and I came to love Israel. I lived there for a while, for a number of years as an adult. I worked there I was with my children, my husband, and I married an Israeli. And I'm a Zionist from the get-go.
Thank you. Mike, how about you?
Well, I was thinking about this. First of all, everybody, amazing program you've all put on, very inspiring. And as a physician, I can say I would not have been able to pronounce that medication that you stumbled on at all. So, but I had a formative trip when I was 13. Bar mitzvah trip that summer, 1966. And I didn't realize it at the time, how that would mold my thinking. And I was reflecting on it in preparation for this question. I remember one of the most vivid memories, perhaps the most vivid, was being at the top of the King David Hotel. And, we're looking out on at no man's land. And we're having some sort of drink, and a guy comes up to me or comes up, walks by us. My dad says, you know, that guy with the patch on his eye, he's kind of a famous guy. And, you know, it was Moshe Diane. I didn't know. I was a kid. Like, does he play baseball? You know, I don't care. But so that was one memory from that. And the other thing I remember is seeing the old city. And wow, we can't get to the old city. It was shocking to me. And then the final thing, still remember, like Mount Scopus. Wait, there's something Hadassah over there, and how does that work? It's on the wrong side. But you know, those three things actually resonate with me. Here you have Moshe Dayan, who you know represents the Jewish people, saying, you know, we're not going to depend on anybody else. We're going to depend on ourselves. We're going to do it. And we're going to refuse to be victims anymore. And that was a strong statement. And seeing the old city, wow, that's our tradition. That's our heritage. And that's what it forms our solid nature. And then there's Hadassah up on the hill, with the aspiration to do right by the world and to help the world. And it all makes me so proud. And I've always been proud. And that's a bit of my Zionist story. I'll stop there because we don't have much time.
Diane?
I was a convert to Judaism when I was 30. I was pregnant with my first child, and my husband was Jewish. I wanted our son to be Jewish. And I wanted to be Jewish too. I wanted to raise him Jewish. And at the time, just a complicating factor was that Israel was considering changing its right of return. They were going to be a little more strict about who was a Jew. I wasn't clear that the son of a shiksa, a non-Jewish woman, would be considered Jewish. Anyway, so that was a bit of a motivation. But it really started before then. When I finished college in North Carolina, I went to New York City, and it was wild. All my new friends were Jewish. It was incredible. And I met my husband, my soon-to-be husband, soon after I moved to New York. He was Jewish. I just embraced the culture, the history, the religion. It was great. And then I found out that my grandmother on my father's side, who had come to this country in the early part of the first decade of the 20th century, that she was Jewish. She came from Hungary. They never practiced Judaism. She and her brother and sister came alone together when they were in their teens, and they were escaping persecution and just did not want to acknowledge it. I guess it's not too unusual a story, but we even found some Jewish artifacts of hers. It meant a lot to me. And it meant a lot to my father, actually. He was very excited about that. Okay, fast forward 4 years, my mother-in-law died. My father-in-law gifted all the women in the family with Hadassah life memberships because his wife had been a Hadassah member and her mother had also. And then after he did that, I moved to Charlottesville, Virginia, and there was this wonderful chapter of Hadassah here in town. I joined, met wonderful women, and that's where I really learned about Zionism and embraced it.
Great. Gail?
Thank you. I really appreciate that. It's an incredible story. So, you know, I grew up with Jewish parents who were not particularly Zionistic. We were political, we read, we always knew what was going on over there. They supported Israel, but it wasn't in my DNA to say, I want to go over there and see this, touch it, feel it. But as I grew as an adult, I did. And when I was 31, I went on a trip. I was so excited. I went on a trip of single people from all over the United States. There were 130 people, single Jews, to Israel on this 10-day trip. And there were like 4 buses. And I'm telling you the truth, at the end of those 10 days, I got 3 marriage proposals. And I am telling you the truth that it changed my life. And because I went over there, and all of a sudden I realized that I didn't have to explain who I was in the world. I could be me. I didn't have to, I wasn't an afterthought. I was part of it. And it just, I cannot tell you, it changed my whole way of thinking. It brought me such joy. And it brought me to this place where I realized when I was with my people, because I was living in the South and there weren't a whole lot of Jewish guys to date. And here I was, like, sort of among my people, thinking, this is it. This is where I want to be, which of course it's not where I wound up, but I will tell you, I've been there 10 times and I plan on being there many more times. And I do believe that Israel is integral to the existence of the continuation of the Jewish people. Thank you, Marcia.
And I want to say, as far as myself, something just very briefly, that I started thinking the other day that there are basically two kinds of Zionists. There's the uninformed and the passive Zionists, and there's the informed and the active Zionists. Mm-hmm. And up until about 6 years ago, I was the uninformed, passive Zionist. I grew up in a home where my mother came to this country in 1920 when she was 6 years old, and she would talk about how lucky she was that her parents left Europe early and how sad it was that there was no Israel during World War II and how many relatives we had that perished. And that was pretty much it. She sent me to Israel on a trip when I was 16. And sure, I'm a Jew, I'm glad there's Israel, and that was it. And about 6 years ago, I've spent most of my career working on college campuses, and I started getting very concerned about what was going on the college campuses with the Students for Justice in Palestine and the BDS, the boycott movement. And I realized I needed to do something. In my own little way, I needed to jump in and be active. And I also realized you can't be active if you're not informed. And I really wasn't. I didn't feel like I had the information to combat arguments that I knew were wrong, statements that were wrong. Israel stole the land from the Arabs, and Israel is committing apartheid, and Israel is committing genocide, but I really didn't know how to fight it. So if there's anything I can say today to inspire some of our listeners, I hope all of our stories will kind of spur you to become more informed, and probably many of you know much, much more than I do, but to take your own knowledge a little bit further and take your own advocacy and action a little bit further. And in just a couple of minutes we have left, we have a few quick questions. Florence, I'm going to give you this first one. What kind of activities do local chapters do? Local Hadassah chapters? You're on mute. What?
We do a variety of different things. Now, because of COVID, everything has been on Zoom for this last year. So taking that into consideration, we had the Durham chair of the council and Wendy Jacobs speak. We had, that was very well attended. We had Judith Ruderman, Dr. Ruderman from Duke University, speak about the Jewish mother in Jewish literature. We have eat and learn brunches. We have lunches in the Sukkah. We have a visit to the National Museum, for example, or to other ones as well. We co-sponsor programs with the local JCC, which is wonderful, the Federation. We have Hamantaschen demo, which was very good. My neighbors who attended also started to bake Hamantaschen, and they aren't Jewish. And we have all kinds of things. Bingo, absolutely. The fundraising we have dinners that honor special members, things of that nature. We have game night, a variety of things that pleases every palate.
Great. Thank you. Inspires all of us to become members of our local chapters.
I encourage you.
And I don't know if Diane or Gail, who wants to take this question, but is Hadassah's work completely funded by dues and donations? Or are there other sources of funding?
So as you can imagine, the economics of Hadassah are just intense. And so dues and donations and really good portfolio and that's probably the totality of it. We don't really make money doing much of anything else. And the dynamics of the money and the economics of medicine in Israel are very, very complicated. So pretty much those who are watching our, so it's pretty much dues, donations, and, or shall I say dues, philanthropy, and those who are, our money managers who do all of that work.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just add one more thing, Gail and Marsha? We also have annuities that many people buy. And that helps everybody. That helps Hadassah, and it helps the person who is purchasing the annuity. So we have things like that. All sorts of levels of giving. You can give $18 and you can give $10 and you can give $1,000. You'll be a keeper of the gate. So all kinds of things.
All levels of giving.
All levels of giving, yes.
And all ways of giving.
Yes.
So I'm going to combine two questions now. So one is, does Hadassah have mission trips to Israel? And the other question was directed specifically to you, Gail. Was the trip that you found your mate on, was that a singles trip? Was it a Hadassah trip? And did you actually find your husband on that trip, or you just had all these proposals?
No, he was waiting somewhere else. My husband, I did date one of the men who asked me to marry him for 18 months afterwards. It was not a Hadassah trip. It was a Federation trip. And it's so funny, when I went on my Hadassah president's mission, that gentleman wound up making ALIYAH. And we've been in touch our whole, ever since. And I actually went and visited him, and it was really fun. It was really fun to see him. It was amazing. It changed my worldview. Yeah. And what was the other question?
Does Hadassah have some sort of mission trips or tours?
Absolutely more important question. Diane, do you want to speak to that? Because I'm talking too much.
Well, we have all kinds of missions, and we could probably include a link with give it to Mike at the end. And they used to be more focused and I think a little more serious, but now they have all kinds of fun ones, whatever interest you have. If you like cooking, you could go to Israel and learn how to cook like an Israeli and eat great food. And nature, you go out and hike and do things. And of course, you get to visit the hospitals and you get to visit the youth villages, but so much more. It's partly being a tourist in Israel, which I am dying to do myself. I'm going to do one of these missions very soon.
Right. So last question, we had registrants come in from the Voice for Israel emails, and we've had registrants come in from Hadassah. And here's someone that came in from Hadassah who is not familiar with Voice for Israel. And Mike, can you tell me a little bit about what Voice for Israel is? You're on mute. Right.
Thank you for that question. We've been in existence for about 11 years. We're a home for the pro-Israel community in the Triangle. We promote other pro-Israel institutions or events. We have our own events. We collaborate on events. We began because there are great institutions in our community, but but sometimes they couldn't focus just on pro-Israel activities, largely because, sadly, I'm not saying anything people don't know, but Israel in certain sectors is debated a lot. And we don't feel Israel is above criticism. We all criticize, we understand it, but we just think it's miraculous and wonderful. And we want to sort of educate and promote on that. So we've forged a lot of ties to organizations, both locally and nationally and internationally. We have speakers. There are challenging current events that occur in our community, be it on the political or in the academic spheres where anti-Zionism comes about, and we try to challenge that, and we try to do it respectfully. We have wonderful relations with the federations. Most of our leadership are associated with federations and the synagogues, and we want to see even closer relationship with Hadassah, and we'll want to do everything we can to promote Hadassah in the community.
Great, thank you. Well, I know we're well over the hour, so I want to thank all of our panelists and speakers and thank the attendees for coming today. And please look at your email for our future programs. Thanks so much. Have a great evening and a lovely Passover.